Hello, everyone. Geoffrey Nance here. Welcome to another edition of Tip Tuesday. If you were able to join us last week, I think there were some issues with some of the recordings. So some of you guys that normally plan on catching the recordings might have missed last week, but we had a discussion on very practical, like I'm ready to start trading. I've been through some courses, or I'm ready to take that next step. Now, what are those next steps? And we said, well, one of the first things you have to do, so you have to get some sort of charting software. So if you understand that the stock market itself makes patterns that are recognizable more often than not, individual stocks do so as well, then first off, you have to understand what those patterns are. But then you got to have a chart so that you can recognize what's happening. The second thing that you really need is to now then go open up a brokerage account. And so for a lot of people, particularly our newer students, they're just I don't know, maybe it sounds scary or whatnot, but for me, I just remember looking at some of the terminology going, I don't have a clue. What am I supposed to say for this? I don't even know what that means. We're going to go through some of that today, and this will be, I think, a very helpful tip for some of you guys that are out there really looking at getting started and understanding what it means to open up a brokerage account, walking you through what some of the terminology actually means, and maybe how to answer that based on what your trading goals are, based on your risk tolerance. I would say to some degree that is going to also factor into probably your level of education. And certainly, one of the things they're going to ask about is your actual risk tolerance. Now, risk tolerance could be determined by a number of factors. It could be your age, but age in and of itself isn't an automatic factor as, hey, you're a little bit older, you need to be less risky. It may be that, hey, you're a little bit older, you're thinking about retirement, you're looking at your account going, that's not enough. I needed that number to be a lot higher. You know what? I may have to be a little bit riskier here just to try to build that thing up so that I can retire when I wanted to. Whereas, somebody that may be younger, normally they'd say, well, you can be riskier because you have more time to recover. They may look at it and say, well, kind of with where I am, I'm just going to kind of stay steady here. And depending on your personality, some of that comes into play too. You're just like, well, I don't know, risky seems bad. Thankfully, after my time with Tradeway, I've been exposed to a deeper, fuller understanding of risk and how we as believers ought to take more risk than we normally do. Educated risk, informed risk, certainly, but certainly risk. Whereas I think there's a tendency for a lot of us just to kind of come in there and be like, hey, don't get out of the boat. Just stay the course. It'll all work out in the end, that kind of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about what some of these phrases mean. But yeah, we got to go open up a brokerage account. So what is a brokerage account? The actual idea here is that your broker is going to be the go-between, if you will, between you and those that are out there in the major exchanges making these stocks or options available to you. So we have these market makers, and their job is to make trades available. So you've got stock that's available to you, you've got options that are available to you, and at certain prices, the bid and the ask, somewhere in between those, you'll be able to make trades during market hours. Now, can you trade before and after? You certainly can, but that's a little bit different. So we don't normally dive too deep into that. We kind of keep it, hey, market's open from 8:30 to 3 o'clock Central Time. Adjust accordingly for your time zone. But let's trade within those hours. And again, that's plenty of time for you to make your trades. But market makers create this opportunity for us to trade. And then our broker essentially acts a bit like a bank. So once we open up a brokerage account, and there are a bunch of them out there, some of them that you guys will recognize, some of them that you're probably not going to recognize. In fact, we're going to talk about one of those today, which you guys have probably never heard of. They're not out there on, getting ads on TV shows or anything like that. But we'll talk a little bit about why Tradeway is going to recommend them. What does that look like? How do you go about that process? And we'll go through that. Now, what are some of them? I mean, you've got like, TD Ameritrade, and they've got their Thinkorswim attached to them. I mean, that's kind of one of the bigger ones. Then you've got, your Charles Schwab's. Then you've got some lesser known ones like Tastyworks. You've got Tradier, which is one that we're going to talk about. And then there's, several of them that I have never even had any particular dealings with. So we'll go through and talk about some of those as well. But basically, you need a broker. And once you've opened and established this brokerage account, you're going to need to fund that account. Most of them have a very detailed process as to how you can put that money over in that account. But that's going to be the place where you're going to essentially have it, and just think of it a little bit like a checking account. So you have that money sitting in your account. Nobody else can touch it or do anything with it. It's just yours. But you're going to use that money to make your trade. So you got to establish an account, and then you have to fund that account. And once you've established the account, funded the account, then you'll be able to start trading. So if you're relatively new and you're going, all right, what is my process? You've got some education, maybe with Tradeway, maybe with somebody else. Now you said, all right, I've got some charting software. Now I'm going to go establish a brokerage account. How do I pick one over the other? All right, I would say there's a few things for you to keep in mind. One, what are some of your main desires, right? So what's a bigger deal for you? Is it the amount that they charge for commissions? A commission is what they charge you to get into a trade and out of a trade. Do they charge you for both enter and exit? Some do, some don't. So you'll look through those things. How easily can I get access to some of the higher, riskier, more speculative levels of trading? Is this brokerage going to work with me on that and giving me those abilities? How reliable are they? So those are a couple of things. And then what are some of the bells and whistles that come along with it? And then I would say kind of the last thing here is when it comes to the actual brokerage itself, functionality. How does it work? How easy is it to use this broker? And what you're going to find, thankfully, I've been able to go through several through the years, is that a lot of them are fairly similar. So the setup, particularly if once you start trading options, is going to be fairly similar. Stocks pretty straightforward with most of them. So the good news is the functionality for most brokers is going to be pretty similar. So if you move from one to another, you're probably going to say, all right, so this is pretty simple. I kind of understand where I'm supposed to go in order to get to where I want to be. That's a really good thing. Now, if you're completely new, all of this, of course, is going to look like, foreign to you. So you are going to have to kind of go through some things, but that should be, something that you're going to be able to walk through. And then a lot of these places are going to have tutorials anyway, so that you ought to be able to go through those. So what I thought we might do today is just simply go and just start to look at what some of these look like. So what is the process here? And let's just go to Tradier. So that's the first one, Tradier brokerage. You can just search for that. Now you'll notice that it is interesting that a couple of different ones pop up. I'm going to share my screen here a little bit so you guys can see what's happening here. So let's do this. Share screen. All right. So all I did is I just simply went into my little search bar. I typed in Tradier. And interestingly enough, interactive brokers came up. Well, that's not what we were going for. There's Schwab. Okay, that's interesting. So they paid a little bit of extra money to try to come up at the top when you search. I guess this is Microsoft, this Bing or whatever. If you do Google, it may be the same thing. But yeah, you'll come down here. And what you're looking for is the HTTPS secure brokerage.tradier. And we're just going to click on that. And now, of course, there's a couple of things that you can do here. You can go to pricing so that you can kind of see what their fee structure is like. There's more that's involved here, but let's just kind of go through this process. While we're here, let's just look around and see what else came up. So Tradier came up, several things about it. There's E-Trade, TradeStation. Let's see, there's a couple of others that came up. So just interesting, the things that you'll get. So just make sure you go to the one that we're trying to get you to, which is https brokerage.tradier.com. And then just click on that, easy enough, right? And then when you go over here, you're going to say, well, what am I trying to do, right? Here's some different stuff about the company and whatnot, but what am I trying to do? Well, I'm going to open an account. All right, so easy enough. Open an account. So I'll just click on that. And then look at this, guys. We start to be like pretty straightforward here. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through all of this with you guys because I don't want to create another account here. But first name, last name, email, confirm your email, create a username, create a password. Simple enough. All right. And you go through that process. And then once you get to the next stage, what you'll notice is, I wish they had let me do this, because one of the things that would pop up next, which is what I really wanted us to be able to see here a little bit more, is some of the questions that you might have from there. So I think everybody at this point can be like, Geoffrey, I got that. That's pretty easy, right? All right. So what do you want? And I would encourage you guys, I don't know if you're like me, where you get to a point, you got like so many usernames and passwords that you write that down somewhere so that you can remember it. But you'll just create that, and then you're going to go to the next page. And if we were to able to do that, we go to the next page here, and then essentially it would get into the things that I think might be a little bit more of an issue for you if you're setting up an account. So let's just talk a little bit about the types of accounts. All right, so one is I can have essentially what's known as a cash account. A cash account just simply means that you have obviously cash in that account, but that's kind of all you have. So you're not able to do certain things like step 3 and step 4. Those of you that have attended those classes with us, they're going to require that you have what's called a margin account. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. A straight cash account would be one that you would use if you were just going to trade stocks, or you thought, yeah, I'm just going to stick to maybe just stocks and options. If that's the case, then you could just do a cash account and that would be fine. If you are saying, yeah, you know what, I want to get into spreads, maybe get into some naked puts, maybe get into some different things that are going to require a little bit more of a speculative nature, then I'm going to need what's called a margin account. Now, let me explain what a margin account is here for you guys. A margin account is essentially the opportunity for you to borrow money. Now, just because you have a margin account doesn't mean that you need to use the margin. So what margin does is, let's just say you've got, we'll make our math easy here. I've got like $2,000 in my account. And I want to go buy stocks, but I want to buy $4,000 worth of stock. Essentially, having a margin account, the broker would allow you to borrow that extra $2,000, so you could go buy $2,000 more of that stock and make that trade on. And that's called that's what happens in a margin account. Now you might be sitting out there going, well, Geoffrey, what if I only had 2,000 in my account and I ended up losing 3? Well, then you're gonna have to come up with $1,000. Because you owe them, right? So they're going to let you borrow it. Normally the terms here are really small, like it's like 1%, that kind of thing. And for most people, they're not going to be in a trade that long. So borrowing the money is a pretty cool thing. The other thing that it allows you to do is it's kind of required for spread trading, even though you really don't use it. Interesting enough, when you're doing your spread trading, it is required there. If you're doing some naked trading, which means you're just uncovered in your positions, then you're going to need that margin account as well. So can I do an individual account? Yes. All right. So that's just you. I just want to be me. I want to have my own account. It can be an individual account. It can be a cash account. It can be an individual margin account. Can I get a joint tenants with rights of survivorship? What does that mean? So let's say I've got my account. My wife doesn't trade, but I want the money to go to her. If something were happen to me without having to go through probate, I would set up that joint tenants with rights of survivorship. Now, could we set up an account where both of us are on that? We certainly could. We could set up that type of account where both of our names are on there. That would be called a joint account. So that's easy enough. But even if you just have an individual account, you type in, you fill out the, rights of survivorship, it goes to them. You avoid the probate stuff there. It just makes it easier if something were to happen to you. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Of course, you have an IRA, an individual retirement agreement. That's also something that you could set up, assuming that you meet the criteria required for an individual retirement agreement. But if you're able to do that, you could set up one of those. And then, of course, there's the Roth IRA. So I don't know if you guys are in a place where you have established a Roth, but if you haven't and you can, I would certainly encourage you to do that. Why? Because a Roth is pre-taxed money. So whatever you use to start that account, assuming that's been pre-taxed. Now, the way that the Roth works is that you're no longer taxed on the gains that you make within that account. If you set up the traditional IRA, there's no tax from one year to the next, but you are going to be taxed as you begin to make those withdrawals once you reach that age limit where they have those required minimum distributions. With a Roth, there is no tax on that. So if you're maybe a younger person, I would certainly encourage you to consider setting up a Roth and trading within that Roth. And that's just a great opportunity there. If you have some more questions about any of that, you can certainly let us know. All right. So that's pretty easy there. That's Tradier, and that's one that Tradeway has recently recommended. Some of you guys might have heard of Tastyworks. So how do we get there? Well, let's just go over here. Let's see what pops up. https://Tastyworks. Okay, here we go. All right. So account types. Let's just go over here. We were talking about this. What are the types of accounts that they have available? They have an individual, margin and cash, which we talked about, joint. Now you could do the tenants in common with rights of survivorships. And then, of course, you have your retirement accounts or agreements here, traditional, the Roth, and then a SEP. And they also have the ability to create corporate accounts, trust. And then they've got some stuff about international. International accounts are tricky. If you're one of those folks that is from Canada here, we do have some of those. Just keep in mind that you're going to have to work a little bit on brokers. There's just some compatibility issues there with the Canadian government, where it makes it really tough for some of these brokers to open up accounts for those that are trading from Canada or internationally. So again, you'll have to check that out. But again, this tells you the different types of accounts that you could open. So again, let's just say we just want to do an individual margin. We just go over here, click on open an account, and it's going to bring up what we need. So email, confirm your email, username, password, continue. And then once you go from there, they're normally going to get like a code. They'll send that to you. And then they're going to ask for a lot more detail. And that's when you're going to get into the risk tolerance level. Essentially, guys, if you're just wanting to trade stocks, then it doesn't really matter what level you're at. I will say that if you are considering trading options or spreads, they do consider those to be more speculative in nature. They really want you to understand the risk that you're taking and how option prices move very quickly with that percentage there, what that looks like. So just make sure that if you do decide, hey, I am willing to have a higher risk tolerance, you understand what that means and how that works. Here's their fee structure. You can see that. Now, the other thing that I didn't mention earlier that you guys might want to consider is like TD Ameritrade. Now, TD Ameritrade has both charting software and it's a broker. So they have their Thinkorswim trading. So that's where you're going to be able to have your broker with them, but they also have the charting software. So for some people, now the TD Ameritrade has a lot of bells and whistles. I think in general, it's a little bit more complex than some of the others, but some people like that. And they like the, kind of get it all in one where I don't have, charting software over here, brokerage over there. They kind of like that, ability to go back and forth. Now, the other thing I would say, and again, what is it like to create an account here? Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. All of this is the same. Pick the type of account. That's the biggest thing, right? One of the things we didn't talk about is, the joint or the minor, that's normally a custodial account. So if you have someone that's under 18, you can also open up an account for them. There's different types you can open up there. So you want to be aware of that and what that looks like. So just make sure as you're opening those up, you kind of figure out what that looks like. But yeah, pretty easy. Once you click on that, let's just, go over here, individual account. Sure. What's that look like? All right. So here's your name, all that stuff. The personal information, as I mentioned a couple of times, once you do the personal information, now they're going to ask you for some financial stuff. Some people aren't very comfortable with that. Well, remember, guys, it's kind of like opening up a bank account. Now, they're not going to deny you because of, hey, I make this amount of money or that amount of money. But they do want to know that information. They are going to ask for things like your social security number. This is government regulated. So there are things that they have to know about you. They have to make sure that you're opening an account, that you're not using this to funnel money through. So you are going to have to answer some questions. Again, it'll be like opening up a bank account. What's your ID? What's your social security number? What's your, where do you live? Those kind of things. And a lot of them will also have your employer, what's their name, address, phone number, things like that. So just want to make sure that you're aware of that as well. There will be, review agreements, things like that. So just keep that in mind because that will be part of the process that you're going through. Now, I want to bring us all the way back over here because one of the things that you'll be able to do, particularly if you have charts by Tradeway, is that you can come back in here and assuming that you have an account open with them, you can get your virtual account, which is really cool. And then you can set up an account with Tradier. One of the things that you can do is we can go over here and add a broker. And what this does is when you have charts by Tradeway, you can link your broker up to either Choice Trade, Ally. You can see here TD Ameritrade, E-Trade we didn't discuss. And then hopefully they'll be adding some more as we go along. But there's Tradier as well. And so if you have an account with one of these brokers, you'll be able to link that directly to your charting software. And you won't have to kind of go back and forth from your chart. Let's just say, like you did this. You say, oh, here I'm at my chart. Now I've got to go over here to my broker and, log into my broker and then go make the trade here. What you can do with this is it's already set up. So you just go over here to your chart. You say, hey, I think, the S&P is going to pop up tomorrow. I'm looking at it here on my chart. I think maybe it will recover from the 100-day. I want to go get into trade. Well, look, all we got to do is go right over here. We click on that. What's our expiration date? We'll just say, Friday. Okay, cool. Which option do you want to purchase? Boom. Now you're just walking through all of that stuff, and you can do it right here, essentially from one platform. So again, if you're using some of those Tradier, TD Ameritrade, a couple of the others that we listed there, then you can link those to the charts by Tradeway. So for some of you guys, you might find that that's a real benefit for you and that that's something you want to consider. And if that's the case, then again, as you're kind of walking your way through, hey, what do I want to do moving forward? What do I want this to look like as far as what my broker, which one I'm going to choose? There isn't necessarily a right or wrong. What we want to do is just help make you aware of what some of the pros and cons are so that you can make an informed decision. And I would say, outside of the things that we mentioned earlier, just, look at pricing, look at what you're getting, and then see the functionality of it. And then whether or not, like I said, if linked up to charts is a big deal for you, make sure it's one of those that's already been approved. If you're on some of the others, they won't have access yet. They may in the future, they may not, but these certainly do. Can you have multiple brokerage accounts? Absolutely. Can you have multiple accounts at the same broker? Absolutely. Okay. Can you have different types of accounts with the same broker? Yes. Can you have different types of accounts with multiple brokers? Absolutely. Is there a limit to how many accounts I can have? I don't think so. Yeah, but most of them are going to want you to fund those. And then some of them do have a minimum requirement that they want you to fund that with. So again, that may be something that you consider if you kind of know, hey, I'm on the lower end of what I'm starting here. That may be something to consider as well if you are concerned about your initial investment there. All right. Well, there we go, guys. That's a pretty good, I think, overview, maybe even a little bit more than an overview of opening up a broker. Now that we've got our charting software and we've opened up a broker, what we're going to do next week is we're going to go in here and we're going to take this time to say, all right, you've been to classes, you've got your charting set up, you've got your brokerage set up and funded. What's next? Well, it's getting into trades. So next week, we're going to look about what it means to get into trades. We can get into a trade in our real account. We can get into a trade in a paper trade account. We're going to look at both of those next week, and that ought to be a lot of fun. Thanks for being with us today. Tip Tuesday. We'll see you guys next time.